All right, ready to dive in. This time, we're tackling Nobody Wants This, that new Netflix rom-com that seems to be everywhere online.
Everywhere. And with some pretty strong opinions, too.
You guys sent in a ton of stuff, reviews from like the big papers, an opinion piece that really dug in, even a Wikipedia summary, and gotta love it, some YouTube reactions.
Sounds like we've got a real mix of perspectives.
Exactly. So, big question. Is it worth watching? Just that's why we're here.
Well, the premise alone is pretty catchy.
Yeah, agnostic podcast host meets rabbi. Not exactly your typical love story.
Definitely not. We've got Joanne, who's, well, kind of cynical,
Yeah.
podcast host. And then there's Noah, like, rabbi, but not the kind you might picture.
And this isn't just like made up stuff. The show's creator, Erin Foster, based it on her own life. Her husband's actually a rabbi.
Whoa. So how much of this is, like, ripped from the headlines,
That's what I'm wondering. How much is straight from her experience? How much is, artistic license?
Makes you think.
Yeah.
But even just that basic conflict, podcaster, agnostic, falls for a rabbi, that's something people can relate to, right? On some level, at least.
Totally. Interfaith relationships, especially when someone's really involved in their religious community, those can be tough.
No doubt. And everyone seems to agree, Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, perfect casting.
Seriously.
I mean, casting in a rom-com, that can make or break it.
For sure.
Yeah,
If you don't believe the chemistry, the whole thing just flops.
totally. But here, like, they nailed it. The chemistry, it just pops, according to a bunch of the reviews.
It's funny, on YouTube, someone said watching them together is like a time machine. Straight back to the early 2000s.
Veronica Mars in the OC all over again.
Exactly. But okay, nostalgia aside, it's not all just like longing glances and romantic tension. Apparently this show's funny.
Oh yeah, tons of reviews mention that. Humor is a big plus, especially the family dynamics.
Oh, like that scene where Joanne tries to make a traditional Jewish Shabbat dinner for Noah's mom, and it's a total disaster.
Good intentions, but yeah, not always smooth sailing.
Hilarious, though. And it kind of reminds you that, like, good intentions don't always translate across cultures.
Exactly. It's that awkward, relatable stuff that makes it so funny. And it's not just the main couple, the supporting characters, especially Joanne's sister, Morgan, and Noah's brother, Sasha. They just kill it.
Oh, speaking of them, a bunch of reviews were raving about Morgan and Sasha. They've got their own side plots going on, which, like, mirror the main romance in interesting ways.
Right. Like Morgan, she's dealing with her sister finding love, maybe leaving their podcast, and it makes her think about, like, her own insecurities, what she wants out of life.
And then there's Sasha, stuck between his wife, who's, like, super demanding, and his daughter getting ready for her bat mitzvah.
It adds this whole other layer, right? You see how these relationship dynamics play out in different ways.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out where they fit in and their families and their own lives. Super relatable.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they're hilarious together, too. There's this scene where they're trying to figure out some Yiddish phrase, and it's pure gold.
Sounds like the writers really put effort into making these characters, like, more than just comic relief.
Yeah, they're definitely multifaceted. Okay, but we got to talk about the elephant in the room that a few sources brought up, the whole Jewish representation thing. Some were praising it for showing this hot, cool young rabbi who smokes weed.
Right, but others felt it kind of relied on stereotypes and negativity, even using the term shiksa.
And that's where it gets tricky, right? Trying to walk that line.
Because they are trying to show, like, a modern rabbi, someone who breaks the mold.
Exactly. But then some reviewers felt like it fell back on those familiar tropes, didn't really capture how complex Jewish life can be.
One review even said, like, yeah, the intention might have been good, but focusing so much on rituals and rules, it gives a kind of superficial view of Judaism.
It's a tough one, for sure. You want to represent a culture authentically, but you're also trying to tell a good story.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it seems like Nobody Wants This isn't afraid to start that debate, which might be its biggest strength.
Definitely. It's making people think critically about these issues, start conversations about representation, being sensitive to different cultures.
Right. Even if the show doesn't get everything perfectly right, that's a valuable thing.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got this interesting premise, great casting, supporting characters that people love, funny moments, and then this whole debate about representation. But let's get back to the main event, the romance. Do these two actually make it work?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the show keeps you guessing. You see them dealing with their differences, their families, all their own doubts and stuff.
It's like constant push and pull, amazing chemistry, but also real obstacles.
Totally. And then there's that whole ick factor that kept popping up in reviews.
Ick.
Yeah, for those who haven't encountered it, it's those little things that suddenly turn you off someone,
Yeah.
even if you were like totally into them before.
Like I was feeling it and then bam, the ick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the show, Joanne, she starts getting the ick about Noah.
Oh, there's that scene where she's talking about getting the ick from the way he eats soup.
Sounds ridiculous.
But probably we've all been there, like you're head over heels and then they do something tiny, totally random, and it's just over.
I think it's genius, though, the way they capture the anxieties of dating today.
Right, like we're bombarded with choices, this idea that someone better is always out there.
Exactly. So we're hyper aware of any little flaw, any ick, thinking maybe this means they're not the one.
Like it's a defense mechanism, right, against getting hurt, against settling.
Maybe. And it makes that whole will they, won't they thing even more intense.
Totally. It adds a layer of like realness that you don't often see in rom-coms. They usually gloss over the messy parts.
Right. But nobody wants this. Goes right there into the awkward, uncomfortable stuff.
So we've got this interfaith couple battling the ick, tons of family drama, sounds intense.
It is. And it all builds up to this ending that people are divided on. Some loved it. Others were like, wait, what?
Ooh, a cliffhanger. Do tell.
Okay, no spoilers, but let's just say Joanne tries to end things with Noah, convinced it'll never work.
Classic rom-com move. So does he pull out all the stops? Grand gesture to win her back.
It's not quite that dramatic, but definitely romantic. And you're left wondering, can they really bridge that gap between their worlds?
Sounds like we'll have to wait for season 2 to find out. But before we get into that ending and what it all means, let's break down some of the standout scenes and those recurring themes that really make this show tick. Okay, so we've talked about the chemistry, those supporting characters, and how the show tackles interfaith relationships. But what about moments that really stuck out to you?
There's this scene really resonated with me where Noah's explaining Shabbat to Joanne.
Oh, yeah.
And he's saying it's not just about the rituals, you know. It's about having this space for rest, reflection in a world that's always on.
That's a good point. It's easy to get hung up on the like outward stuff, rules and rituals, and forget the deeper meaning.
Exactly. And the show, it gets that tension. This scene also brings up like finding common ground even when your beliefs are different.
Yeah, even though Joanne's not religious, she's trying to understand where Noah's coming from.
Right. And that makes their relationship so interesting. It's not about converting each other, pushing their beliefs.
It's about respect, finding that deeper connection.
Totally. There's another scene that shows this too. Joanne goes to Shabbat dinner with Noah's family.
Talk about out of her element.
Totally. But she doesn't just like shut down. She tries to connect with them, learn about their traditions.
But I'm guessing things don't go perfectly smoothly.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Got to have those awkward moments, those cultural mix-ups. It's a rom-com, after all.
Exactly. But what matters is Joanne doesn't give up. She keeps trying, even when it's uncomfortable, because she cares about Noah, wants to be part of his life.
Yeah, it's like she's saying, I might not get it all, but I'm willing to learn.
And that's huge in any relationship, right? Not just interfaith ones.
Totally. It's about being open to things that are new, even if they're a little scary.
And that's got to resonate with people, right? Especially now, when it's so easy to just stay in your own little bubble.
For sure. This show says real connection comes from those differences, not from pretending they're not there.
That's powerful. But it's not always easy, is it? Even if you're trying your best, those cultural differences can lead to clashes.
Oh, yeah. And the show doesn't shy away from that. There are times when Joanne and Noah, they butt heads over their beliefs.
Their families get involved, expectations clash.
Right. And then they start wondering if they could really bridge that gap between their worlds. And don't forget the ick.
Even when they agree on the big stuff, those little things can still get in the way.
The ick is fascinating, right? It's like we're so aware, looking for red flags, thinking, is this a deal breaker?
Totally. It's like we want the big, passionate love story, but we're also scared of making the wrong choice, settling.
Exactly. And it comes out in these weird ways, like being grossed out by how someone eats soup.
The show uses the ick so well to explore those anxieties everyone has about relationships.
It's hilarious, but it's also like really insightful. And I think that's why so many people are connecting with the show. It's funny, relatable, but it gets at some deeper truths about love and how tricky it can be.
Okay, so we've got this interfaith couple trying to find common ground, hilarious cultural moments, and the looming threat of the ick. But what about that ending? You mentioned it was kind of open-ended.
It leaves some things up in the air for sure, no spoilers,
Yeah.
but let's just say Joanne makes a choice, and it could change everything for them.
Ooh, suspense. So is it a happy ending, sad ending, or somewhere in between?
I won't spoil it, but it's both hopeful and real. Like,
Wow.
he acknowledges love isn't always easy. It takes work, compromise.
And sometimes you just have to trust your gut, even if it takes you somewhere unexpected.
Exactly. Not a fairy tale, but definitely authentic. And that's what makes it so good. You feel hope, but you also remember relationships are a journey, not a finish line.
Speaking of journeys, this show's taken us on a wild ride. We've laughed, maybe teared up a bit, cringed at those ick moments.
And learned a lot along the way about different faiths, how tricky dating is, and how important it is to find that common ground.
So for our listener, after all this, what's the verdict? Worth adding to the watch list.
I'd say definitely give it a shot. It's entertaining, makes you think, great cast, funny writing, and it'll spark some conversations for sure.
Well said. I think we've covered pretty much everything about Nobody Wants This. The premise, the characters, the humor, that whole romance, the representation debate, and all those thought-provoking themes.
It's been great diving into this with you. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some insights, maybe sparked your curiosity to check it out.
Totally. And remember, you're always welcome to make up your own mind, chat about it with friends, family. That's what makes watching shows so much fun. It's wild how this show, it can be light and rom-com-y, but then it hits you with these deeper themes.
Right. It's not just about falling in love. It's about cultures clashing, stereotypes, the whole mess of modern relationships.
Exactly. Entertaining, but also makes you think, which is hard to pull off.
Definitely. Gives you laughs, stuff to ponder, and things to debate about afterward.
And speaking of debate, I was struck by how they use humor to handle some pretty touchy subjects, like that scene where Joanne's trying to learn Hebrew.
Oh, before meeting Noah's family.
Yeah, and she ends up calling his grandma a donkey.
That scene is gold.
Hilarious, but it also shows how easy it is to mess up when you're dealing with different languages, customs.
And it does it in a way that's funny and smart at the same time.
It's like they're saying, hey, we can laugh at the awkward stuff, but let's also learn from it.
Yeah, which is so important these days. It's easy to be quick to judge, but this show says, let's embrace the awkwardness, learn from mistakes, find the humor in those cultural differences.
Reminds us we don't always have to be so serious, right?
Totally. Sometimes the best way to connect across cultures is to just laugh together.
Laughter, it's a universal language. Breaks down walls, builds connections in ways that words sometimes can't.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for our listener who's been with us this whole time, I think we've given them a lot to chew on.
Whether they watch the show or not, hopefully they've learned a little something about interfaith relationships, the ups and downs of dating, how important it is to embrace those differences.
And if they do watch it,
Oh, I'm sure they'll have plenty to talk about with friends and family. This is a show that gets people talking, makes you question things, and in the end, maybe leaves you feeling a bit more hopeful about the world.
beautifully said. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
It has been a pleasure exploring Nobody Wants This with you. And to our listener, we hope you've enjoyed the ride as much as we have.
Until next time, happy watching.